Happy Halloween once again. Happy October. Bald now, Rachel McDonald, back with you for another review. So, this is going to be a review of Hard Candy from 2005. It's directed by David Slade. It was his first movie as a director, his first proper feature. He came from like pop videos before then, and since then he's had a bit of a varied career because he directed 30 Days of Night after Hard Candy.
Oh,
He,
okay.
yeah, that was him, his second film. He also directed one of the Twilight movies, so he's had a
Dear.
really varied career. But guess he maybe brought a bit of a horror edge to that. But anyway, this was his first proper film, Hard Candy. It stars a very young Ellen Page, or Elliot Page as she's now known. But this was one of her first movies. I think it was like her third movie, her third proper movie, something like that. And it's definitely one, the least you know going in, the better. 18-year old who has contact with this older guy on the internet. They sort of exchange emails, like early form of messenger, I guess. There's a bit of a flirtation there, and they meet up one day for like coffee, photographer. And in a way, spoiler free, that's all I can tell you, except there is a turning of the table sort of thing where you expect maybe things to develop one way, where you wonder if he's going to be a threat, but it's actually turned around. And there's a certain mystery surrounding his backstory and exactly how much of the truth he's telling, if he is believable, or if, some dark secrets lurking in his past. I'd seen this a few times, but it was the first time watch for Rachel. So, Rachel, what did you think of Hard Candy?
So I did like the film. I knew a little bit about it going in, so I knew the premise. So I knew that it was, about a young girl who did kind of lure a predator, and then turn the tables on him. So we'll obviously be getting into spoilers, guys. So just a warning for that. First of all, I thought the performances were quite good. I've never seen Patrick Wilson in such a creepy role, and I
Yeah.
have to say I didn't like it because I love Patrick Wilson. So now when I watch The Conjuring, I'm going to have to remember, no, he's a good guy. But I thought Patrick Wilson in particular was really good. In particular, those opening scenes when you saw him with Elliot Page's character. Haley, her name is. So when you first saw
Yeah.
him with Haley, I thought they did a fantastic job of showing how these predators work and how they get these young girls, who are very susceptible, who may be from bad homes or are searching for something. And I thought that he played the subtlety of the manipulation and the kind of mild gaslighting that they do to these girls to make it think that it's their idea, that they're here on their own free will. There are several times where he mentions, oh, I can't touch you because you're underage, pretending to be the good guy. So I thought that was really good. Once they got into the movie, and we'll talk about this more when we get into spoilers, I thought his performance was really convincing. Now, I have to say, before his transition, Elliot Page, I always had some issues with the acting, and I think it was maybe because he was pre-transition, so he was holding some things back. So any movie that I'd seen him in pre-transition, I had never really been a big fan of him. But I thought that
Hmm.
this movie was probably one of the better roles that I've seen him do. Again, I've heard that post-transition, he's apparently a lot better. Apparently, the more recent season of The Umbrella Academy says that you can see a marked difference in his acting,
Right.
which I think would make sense when you think about what he was going through in his personal life. But I do think as Haley, um, the performance was fantastic. I think when you see her character, like the character of Haley, she starts out very innocent, and you think that she's being taken for a ride, and you want to warn her, and you want her to get away from this creep. But when things really start to get going, I think her character is so interesting. And I think what's really interesting is you don't really get to know much about either character. I mean, you learn little bits and pieces, but most of the film is focusing on like what's happening in the moment. It's not about what's happened previously or get to know these characters' backgrounds or anything. I thought the direction was pretty good. There were a few weird bits where like the action was sped up a bit, or we'd go from like a really quiet scene to like a really intense scene, and it was a little bit jarring. But for the most part, I thought it was good. I have to say the setting surprised me. I think when I first heard about the movie, I was like picturing some like rural cabin in like the Canadian outback where no one's going to hear him scream. So the fact that it took place in
Okay.
such an urban setting, I thought was very interesting, and I thought the color palette that was used was very interesting,
Yeah.
very stark, and really added to the atmosphere of the movie. It wasn't as gory as I was expecting it. I was expecting to see more than we actually did, but I think that worked in the movie's favor. You know, everything was kind of implied, which made it a lot worse. And then obviously, you know, for the sake of the storyline, they didn't show us certain things for like certain reveals. Oh, and I loved Sandra Oh's little 5-minute cameo at the end. That was a nice surprise. Sandra Oh just stopping by for a brief cameo. So that was cool. So overall, I did enjoy it. I think there were a few issues maybe with some pacing. There were a couple of times when I started to become a little bit unengaged. I think some of the dialogue maybe went for a little bit too long, and there were some editing that could have been done. But overall, I
Okay.
thought it was not a bad film, and I'm glad that I finally got around to seeing it. Because yeah, I did quite enjoy parts of it. So overall, like you've obviously seen this film before. How did you go like this viewing? Did you
Yeah.
feel any differently?
She actually appeared in a film previously with, well, at the time Ellen Page, now Elliot Page. They were actually in a film before this, so I guess that might be
Oh.
one reason they're in this
Yeah,
together.
that would
But
make sense. Yeah, because that was such a
yeah,
random cameo. I guess though this was
because
2005,
she's
so
pretty
this was
big now. But
yeah. So this was
at
like
that time,
just a
yeah, she probably
yeah.
wasn't that big. No,
No.
because I think Sideways was a little bit before that, so I sort of think of that as like one of her early big roles. But
Yeah.
yeah, now she's pretty big because of like
Mm,
Killing Eves and a
yeah.
couple of things. So yeah, cool. But yeah, I like this film a fair bit. I've liked it sort of ever since I first saw it. I think it's got a really interesting premise and sort of has a satirical edge to it, which I like a lot. There are one or two like humorous moments. I sort of like her saying I hate fucking Goldfrapp as a reverse because he thinks she likes it all the way through, and he's
Yeah.
sort of showing off how he went to the concert. And there's certain moments like that. I think that sort of dates it a little bit as an early two or mid 2000s film because Goldfrapp is a very mid 2000s sort of band to reference. But that's the couple of like humorous sort of lines like that. But the whole dynamic between them was very convincing, very compelling to watch. They cast it really well. I think I agree, obviously, about Wilson being brilliant, but the reason the Page casting works so well is because of how youthful she looks and how
Yes.
baby sort of faced, and
Hmm.
where there's something lurking beneath that which slowly comes out. And so I think it works so well because she looks so innocent and childlike. For the purposes of that, it makes her look more vulnerable. But I'll say for her, like the performance, when she turns it on and turns the table, for such a small person, and again, I think that's maybe why they cast her as well, because in stature wise, it's a small person. So it sort of makes them more vulnerable. But for a small person, you know, she really knows how to be intimidating in certain teams,
Yeah.
certain scenes, and very sort of vicious and like in your face. And I think the psychology of the film is really effective and
Yeah.
of suspense. Obviously, up to a point, you kind of know where it's going when it comes to Wilson. I think you suspect that he's kind of not on the level, and
Yeah.
you know, I mean, the guy definitely has his issues because of the age difference, and to kind of be flirting with a girl of this age and to sort of lure her in. I mean, it's one thing to maybe have, you know, a casual sort of friendship with someone that age, but to have that sort of flirtation is a
Oh,
whole
he's
new thing.
definitely a predator, and the way
Yeah,
that he
yeah,
plays
but
it, like I said, the subtle gaslighting, the manipulation, so good.
yeah, that was very clever. I mean, that was very believable the way yeah, he would play tricks on her or try to, and I think it was fun watching that develop just because there were certain points where she always seemed to have him figured out, but
Mm,
then he would obviously come back with a bit of a mind game and try to twist things and manipulate things. And it was always interesting to watch. Is she being taken in by this? Or is it
mm,
part of the act? Because she, a lot of times, she always seemed to call his bluff because
yeah.
there was that scene, obviously, when he tried to talk her around and she pretends that she's taken in by it and then sort of starts laughing sort of thing.
Mm,
So,
yeah.
so stuff like that was like satisfying to watch, but there was definitely like suspense over exactly what his backstory was, like how much of the truth he was telling about things.
Mm,
Like you, the direction I think was mostly really good. The use of color made it very disorientating at
yes.
times, which
Yes.
very cold and clinical, and that may well come from the director's like pop video background. I think you could really
Yes.
see that.
Mm,
I do have like my main complaint because I mean it's not a perfect film, but I think my main complaint is with the end of the film, which we'll talk about when we get there. But I did
okay.
think the ending was a bit of a cop out, but
Mm,
that's my main complaint really.
yeah.
But overall, I think it's very good. You know, I
Yeah.
think it's really
I think
into it.
it's very effective, and I think what you were saying about like the colors and everything being disorienting, and I think that the direction as well goes there because there's quite a few shots where the camera pans away from the action, and we get these long shots that look like they're focusing on a wall. I mean, it swings back to the character, and I think it really works to help with like the claustrophobic feel of these two people in this small space together. Obviously, Patrick Wilson's character at certain points she drugs him, she beats him, she suffocates him with the glad wrap. That was a great scene. Loved that
Yeah,
scene. That was very creative. So I think that those weird camera angles and those colors that helps to put you almost in the mind of the character. You know, you feel the disorientation with him. You feel the helplessness and the destruction and the devastation that he's going through. And I think that's really interesting. You know, when the tables have turned, because you kind of think if this guy is a predator, and I'm on the side that believes that he probably has done something. I mean, she finds his stash of like photos that are of like underage girls naked. It's like if you're taking naked photos of underage girls, I'm thinking there's probably some other lines that you've crossed as well.
well,
Um,
because he claims it's because he's a photographer, doesn't he? But
yeah,
it
but
as she points out, it doesn't explain why you would keep them in your house, and
exactly. Uh-huh.
obviously it's very uneasy when they're
Hmm.
that young, sort of thing. It's one thing
Yeah.
if they're legal age, but to do it with some, and just to keep them in your house and the
And I
stuff on
think,
the walls, and
yeah,
I mean, as things went on, his arguments really started to crumble.
they really did. And I mean, he tried a lot of the defenses that predators use, like you
Yeah.
hit on me and you came on to me. It's like, okay, buddy, you're a 38-year-old man. If a 14-year-old girl is hitting on you, guess what? It's up to you, the adult, to say no. You don't get to say, oh, yeah, the child was hitting on me and I was helpless to resist. This is why I think that he probably had done something. Just
Yeah.
his yeah, the way he talked. I mean, even the opening scene alone, where he's with her at the cafe, the way he's talking to her, the manipulation, the gaslighting, it felt like someone who had done this before. This did not feel like his first time. I feel like, you know, if he hasn't outright like committed pedophilia, then he's definitely committed statutory rape. And so either way, I think this guy is definitely a predator. But I do think the movie very interestingly does ask you, even if he's evil, does that mean that her evil cancels out his? Like, she is obviously unhinged. You know, Haley as a character is not
Yeah.
stable. And I actually, as we were watching it, I actually turned to Stephen and I was like, do you think she's done this before? Do you think this is like a practice run and she's going to turn into like a full on psycho and she's just happens to choose bad guys at the moment to like justify herself, but eventually she'll turn into like a full on psychopath? I think the movie does leave those kind of things up for interpretation. Like, is she just going after this one guy, or is this something that she does regularly? What happened to her to make her want to do this? Like, was she molested when she was younger? There's like a lot of
Yeah.
questions that I think are up in the air that this movie really makes you think about, which I think is one of its stronger points. Because it does open up all those doors. It's got a lot of ambiguity, this movie, I think. And I think sometimes that really works because you're really not sure if you should be rooting for her because she's taking out a pedophile, or if she's a psycho that's maybe exacting her own brand of justice on someone who maybe hasn't done anything to quite deserve it.
More sympathetic character, and I think the movie is intentionally making it quite empowering. I think because a lot of the marketing for the movie, like, presented it as sort of almost like a bit more of a role reversal for what a horror movie would normally be, where obviously a lot of times it would be the females who suffer, or they're being chased down, they're sort of the victims or in danger, and almost like it's a reverse of the Date movie where it's sort of the men in the audience who would sort of squirm watching it. One particular scene in you know, especially, but so it has that side to it, and I think that is part of its sort of edge, which I like. But you're right, I think by leaving certain things open, it does make it more powerful and presents more questions, which obviously we can talk about, and it makes you think, because she is, although ultimately you're probably rooting for her and stuff like that, it does make you worry about her, because she is at this vulnerable age of 14. It's one thing if this is a one-off and she just does it and then moves on, but if she intends to continue doing this and going down this path, for someone that young, that's a very worrying trend, and I think it just poses like that dilemma. Obviously, in many ways, it is empowering for her, and you, in some ways you can't blame her, but there's always that question of, did she go too far? Is this the right way to go about it? Is it just better to like report him to the police, sort of thing? But she obviously paints this picture, and she knows of at least one girl, doesn't she, who's a girl locally who has gone missing. And so, and she finds out that he does know this girl, so she's obviously convinced that that he killed her or kidnapped her or something like that. So I think it does come across to me as a little bit of a vendetta, where maybe she is trying to do this in her mind as like justice sort of thing.
What is interesting, and I'm going to get into some spoilers here. We're going to talk about a particularly infamous scene in the movie. I find it interesting if you look at Hayley's character as like an avenging person, or she's here for vengeance. I think that the scene, so there is a scene where Hayley straps Patrick Wilson's character down to a table and basically says that she's going to castrate him. She's got an ice pack on his dick and everything to numb him out. He's strapped down to a table. It's a whole thing. It's a very interesting dynamic, and like you said, because Paige, their stature is so tiny, it is very interesting to see this tiny little female character, and then this big man. It's like you said, it's almost like a, the Date reversal. Guys will be watching it going, oh God, don't want to end up hogtied on a table with, an ice pack on my dick. Like, that's just not on. But I do find it very interesting. I think that, so she does the whole procedure and then threatens to like put his balls down the drain or something like that. But it's then revealed that she didn't actually do it. She didn't actually castrate him, which, by the way, I pretty much figured, because like when she was doing the procedure and he wasn't moving at all, I'm like, I don't care how much ice you pack on his balls, he's going to feel that, okay? Any dude is going to feel that. But I found that really interesting because it shows you that Hayley's maybe not just there for vengeance. Maybe she's just enjoying the psychological torture, because why put him exactly? And I think that's and that's a tell to show you that maybe this is not just an empowerment vengeance thing. Maybe this girl is like just getting her rocks off, like torturing this guy, which again, the guy that she's picked, you don't feel any
Probably
like
deserves
sympathy
it,
for.
but
Probably
yeah.
deserves it. I mean, I spent the first half of the movie going, "Come on, girl, castrate him already." But I did find that very interesting that she put him through all that emotional torture and psychological torture rather than the actual physical torture of removing his balls. And I thought that was a very interesting character tell, you know, to show that maybe she is getting off on this and maybe this is more of a sadism thing than a vengeance thing. And again, that kind of leans into the ambiguity of the character. And so you don't quite know, do you root for her or is she a budding psychopath who's just happened to choose a victim that we don't like? You know, what if she was just doing this to your average person? Could she progress to that as she gets older? You just never know. So I thought
Yeah,
that was interesting.
because I think on that point, what's interesting about that is it's a dangerous road to go down
Yes.
because you might not always be 100% sure then the person is guilty of what you think, sort of thing. In this, I mean, as it goes along, there's definitely
Yeah.
more evidence, and it's really hard for him to make his case after a while. But
Yeah.
if you're going to go down this road, there's going to be times where you can't always be sure if the person's
No.
guilty or how much. So that's always the danger with vigilante sort of justice type thing.
Yeah. Dresses and
Well,
where do your issues start when it comes to the climax of the film?
Well, before I get to the ending, I
Mhm.
will say another thing I liked, which he has this whole history, and the whole thing in a way was a little bit staged, like he doesn't know who she is for certain. I think I
Yeah.
quite like that because she even questions, well, is my name really Haley?
Yes.
Like that sort of
Yes.
thing. So there was this sense of a whole history of her planning this out, and
Yes.
maybe, and that she could be anyone. It seemed as though she was suggesting then he sort of knew nothing about her, so
Yes.
it would actually be very hard for him to go to the authorities if he survived, sort of thing. And so that stuff I like because that again is getting a bit into like the modern online identity sort of themes. So, okay, the end of the film, it was always going to be interesting to see how they ended it.
Mm.
So it comes down and there's this tension where obviously his girlfriend is on her way because Haley has called her, and it sort of cuts between the two scenes. And I think an interesting thing it does, because she obviously says to him, you can end it all now and I'll destroy the evidence and your girlfriend will never know, that kind of thing. Or you can, if you don't, you can take your chances. You know, she's on her way. So that touch and the way she poses that to him is she almost plays to his male ego, where she's sort of saying, this is your legacy. I could leave you with a really bad legacy, or I can clean things up for you, and your girlfriend will never know. So it's almost playing to his male ego, where she's maybe calling his bluff, where he might. It's sort of weird in a way because if he's going to die anyway, but it's this sort of thing of I don't really want that legacy. I don't really want people knowing that, especially my girlfriend, because on some level, maybe this is, at least in his mind, someone he does sort of love. But I think she's playing on his male ego, which I think is the most interesting thing about that. But yeah, I just feel it's a little bit of a cop out now. I wasn't totally convinced he would jump. I don't know. I didn't quite believe that. Maybe I thought he would just maybe take his chances, because I just wondered if he might just not believe her and she would do what she said anyway. And obviously the very final line implies she's not going to do what she promised. But it's this sort of thing where I just thought he might just think he's maybe screwed anyway. And I guess I just wasn't convinced enough that he would take his own life. I just quite believe that. And
no, I do kind of hear you.
Feels a little bit like a cop out, like maybe it just feels like an unsatisfied ending in a way. a little bit cheap in my opinion.
Yeah, I do kind of get it because when they were up on the roof and she had like the noose up there, like, because obviously before that she'd staged a hanging where she'd strung him up. And so she was ready, but he managed to get out of that. So when they were up on the roof and the noose was there, I was like, but what do you have over him that is so bad that he's going to kill himself? Like, I do kind of understand where you're coming from. But now I did read, though, I went and read some trivia that apparently they had filmed a shot of his body hanging off the roof, but they didn't put it in the movie because they actually wanted to leave it ambiguous as to whether or not the girlfriend found him in time. So there is the possibility that he didn't die. They wanted to leave that a bit more ambiguous. Now, I don't know if that makes the movie better or worse. I do kind of get where you're coming from in that it just felt like, yeah, maybe there wasn't enough desperation for her to drive him to kill himself, you know, like to drive someone to do that, like you'd have to have like a big thing on them. Like if she'd had a video or if she'd had proof or if she'd taken photos of herself or something that she could say, this will come out if you don't kill yourself. But yeah, I definitely understand where you're coming from in that the ending was a little bit weak. But I did like the final shot of her, you know, in her little Red Riding Hood type hood. You know, that was a nice
visual they were going
that was
for.
a nice little visual, a nice little play on the Red Riding Hood, big bad wolf thing. But I do get where you're coming from. I do think the ending did taper down a little bit. And I do think it dragged out just a tiny bit as well. I don't think the girlfriend coming and the intercuts worked that well for me. I think there was definitely more tension earlier in the film, but I still thought, you know, the ending was still not too bad, and like I said, the final shot was good, but I do understand what you're saying in that it was just a little bit underwhelming. I do agree with you there.
Yeah, I think sometimes with these films, just to have a character commit suicide and take the easy way out, I think just regardless of if you quite buy into it, it can just seem a bit of a cheap ending. In this case, I don't know how they would end it, which would be satisfying. I don't know, like if he went to jail, maybe that might feel a bit underwhelming. It could just literally come down to a standoff, and it's her or him, so she might have taken him down that way, sort of.
Yeah, that could have been
something
interesting.
like that, but.
No, it did feel like a lot of build for a climax that wasn't like particularly worth the build, which is a pity because the rest of the film they had a good build up, and I thought some scenes were really effective. I actually thought it was going to end with like her kicking the chair out from under him, maybe in the kitchen just as the girlfriend arrived, and maybe walking out for the girlfriend to find him or something like that. I wasn't quite sure where we were going to end up, but you're right. It's hard to tell like what sort of ending would be satisfying for that sort of film because of the premise of the film and the way it worked. It's like, yeah, how do you build to a satisfactory climax? It is a little bit hard, I think, given the subject matter.
Because I also like the scene where she left him and went to take a shower, and she was just laying in wait, like she called his bluff because he comes running in and she's not in the shower. So that once again showed her sort of smarts, how she sort of staged that whole thing, really. Sort of.
Yeah. Where she's just casually walking around cleaning up and he's like crawling out of the bed because he's just been tasered, and she can totally see him, and then she just casually walks past him and just tases him again. Like I think it shows like how at her mercy he is. But I just find it funny because she's so nonchalant. He's crawling along on the floor, you know, and she's just like, nope, stay there. So I thought that scene was entertaining. But no, there were quite a few good setups and like payoffs and stuff like that. But I think it did get let down a little bit by its ending. And like I said, there were a couple of scenes where some of the talking, I was like, okay, I'm drifting off now. Like let's bring it back. It kind of went off a bit. But I think given that it was a film, which basically, I mean, for the majority of the film only had two people in it, you know, you only had two actors, you know, Paige and Wilson playing off each other. And I mean, that's a hard premise to sell, you know, when you only have one or two characters in a film and you're staying in the one setting. I thought, given that we only had the one setting, we only have the two characters, that it moved quite well, you know, for the most part. And it wasn't an overly long film. And I think that, like I said before, they got the claustrophobia and the panic and the intensity of what it would be like to be in that position at the mercy of someone else in your own house. I'd probably give it about a 7 out of 10. I don't think it was fantastic, but I don't think it was a bad film either. I thought it was enjoyable. You know, I'll probably watch it again. If I found it cheap, I'd probably buy it. Like I said, good performances. Paige was really good. Wilson was really good. I really believed both of their characters. Some good tension, some good direction. But like I said, nothing that really blew me away or made me go, wow, this is fantastic. But definitely a good, solid film. So I'd go at 7 out of 10.
A little bit higher. I'll give it 7.5. I do enjoy this one quite a lot. And there's one or two issues. I think, you know, I'm tempted to give it an 8, but there's one or two issues that stop it from being quite an 8. But overall, very good. Reviewing movies and doing special videos all throughout the month. There will be at least 31 reviews from us this month, maybe a couple more, you know, but at least 31. So this is one of them. Like and subscribe to the video. Let us know your thoughts on the movie if you've seen the movie and anything we've been talking about. Share us out on social media and also support me monetarily on Patreon, patreon.com/boardnow. And also there's a PayPal link if you want to make a one-off donation, then I'll put that in the description. Rachel, if you want to promote your channel.
Guys, you can follow me, Rachel McDonald, video essays on TV shows, movies, usually from the early 2000s, but I do cover more recent stuff. My Tumblr and Twitter are both linked in my YouTube, and Keith is usually lovely enough to put a link in the description, unless he's disagreeing with me on something, which does happen because his opinions are wrong. But yes, come follow me everywhere.
Okay, yeah. Whatever. We were agreeing a fair bit on this video.
That's
but
true.
You
yes, we're friends at the moment, but you never know.
Yeah, it fluctuates. It could be anything from video to video. So this could be a roller coaster of a month. So yeah, keep enjoying the spooky season. We'll be back with more soon. Goodbye.